Also today, in other news, a monumental decision from the highest court in the land. The Supreme Court ruled in a 5-4 decision that part of the Voting Rights Act of 1965 is outdated. Now, the provision was designed to stop voter discrimination, requires 15 states to seek federal permission before changing their voting laws. Chief Justice John Roberts, he wrote for the majority opinion, essentially said that the law is outdated. He explained, quote, coverage today is based on decades-old data and eradicated practices. While the Supreme Court is asking Congress to come up with a new formula, liberals are already voicing outrage. Joining me now with reaction, columnist Erik Rush, Fox News contributor Juan Williams. Do you disagree, Juan, with the decision here and outdated data? I mean, it's fairly common sense, right?
No, I think it's not outdated. I mean, if you're pointing back to 1965 when the Voting Rights Act was passed, that would be outdated, no question. But the fact is, just in the last election, the Section 5, the pre-clearance provision of the Voting Rights Act, Sean, was used by the Justice Department, by the federal government, to go into Texas and say that the way that the state had been gerrymandered in terms of congressional districts depressed the Latino vote. Same thing, look at the voter ID. They were able to delay the implementation of voter ID in South Carolina because it would depress the minority vote.
If you look at Atlanta, Cynthia McKinney's old district, that went all the way from Atlanta and snaked all the way down to Savannah. I mean, so it works on both sides, you know.
No, you're right. You're exactly right. I think that the way the gerrymandering is working right now is a distortion. It's based on racial politics to keep the powerful in power in elected office, and it's not allowing, I think, the true expression of what people want.
Related to this law so much. I mean, look, Erik, what John Roberts said, it would have been irrational if they started from scratch in 2006. It would be irrational for Congress to distinguish between states in such a fundamental way with 40-year-old data.
Well, I think that anything that dilutes the influence of the federal government in the state's voting process is going to be frowned upon by this administration, you know, with their imperial policies and all of that. Also, you know, this is going to facilitate these things like voter ID and these anti-fraud measures, which is something that this administration isn't going to want, that liberals aren't going to want, because they're going to allow fraudulent practices to continue in there. They want, you know, this administration wants laxity. When you've got widespread instances of voter fraud coming up, when you've got entire segments of a demographic of voters totaling more than the population of demographics in that area, you know, the states really have to step in and do something. And Eric Holder, the Attorney General, has been fighting that for a long time on this pretext that, you know, there's a lot of discrimination and there's this gerrymandering that is going toward racial, you know, that is racially motivated, when the fact is that it is not.
Well, wait a minute. Why then, Juan, when we had the new Black Panther Party with their batons and their military garb? Oh, you're smiling?
Well, I mean, look, it was one guy standing out of a precinct in Philadelphia, and you want to equate that with people who are being denied the right to vote?
They were being intimidated.
I mean, you want to go back? You want to talk history, Sean? Let's talk about people who were given literacy tests. Let's talk about people who were asked how many bubbles in a bar of soap.
That doesn't happen today. That's what Justice Roberts was saying. Do you think in 1965 Barack Obama, a black American, could be elected president? Do you think that would have happened in 65?
No, of course not.
Okay, so the world's changed. My point. That's Roberts' point.
No, it's not the point. The point Roberts made was that the formula was old and that there's no longer this need for protection. And what I just said to you was, just last year in Texas, the Justice Department filed suit. Judges agreed that this was an outrageous act of depressing minority turnout.
And 2008 in Philly,
let me speak to Eric's point for a second.
But 2008 in Philly, nobody cared about the new Black Panther Party.
Well, they didn't, because nobody ever said that they didn't vote or felt intimidated, Sean. It was one guy. My God, what are you talking? You're making a big deal. You mean one black person shows up and you think, oh my gosh, he's threatening to you?
I wouldn't want to go into a polling booth when I have two guys in military garb and batons.
Sean, let me just tell you, it was a black neighborhood. Nobody even noticed the guy.
Nobody? Really?
Nobody.
Oh, okay. Really? Erik, so I guess that's okay now. It's acceptable. Standard. We can send guys can be in with batons in front of polling places. Okay. Eric,
No,
you
he
agree
was
with that?
convicted, by the way. By the way, he was convicted and told not to do it ever
Excuse
again.
me,
But what's the
he wasn't
big deal? How are you
convicted of
going to
anything.
compare that to what's going on
dropped
in
it.
states that have blocked black people from voting?
Eric?
This is, you know, pointing to the egregiousness of the past is really kind of a non sequitur issue. Nobody's saying that there shouldn't be any oversight at all. But, you know, pointing to the things that have happened in the past that were egregious is not germane to what's going on now. We've got far more of a problem with dead voters and entire blocks of voters getting abducted by aliens or not being able to be found. And please don't interrupt me.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm laughing. That's funny.
Then we have with minorities being prevented from voting. This is a pretext that this administration has been fighting. These conditions do not exist anymore, and I agree with the High Court.
On a positive note, the country, thankfully, rightly so, has made a lot of progress. And what the court was saying here is you can't use 40-year-old outdated data as it relates to this. And I think the court was 100% correct.
Let me just say one last point, Sean.
Yeah.
One last point, which is Republicans, when this thing was extended, you know, the Republicans in the Republican House voted, I think it was like 390 to 33. They said, yes, the formula still holds.
They did, but I think they were wrong. And I think the court agrees with me.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. They might have been playing politics, too. A lot
Oh,
of
come
politics.
on. Now, they're playing politics.
do
They're
that.
Republicans in the House. My God.
Yeah, all right. Good to see you both. Thank you.
Take care,
And by the
Sean.
way, Eric, I was not laughing at you, but when you talk about dead people voting, that's funny.